Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today for our Race Today podcast. And again, a little bit about our organization. Race Today is a podcast, hour-long podcast, where we talk about racism in the United States, as well as incorporate an activist part at the end of each of our presentations. My name is Dr. Alicia Williams, and I am one of the co-producers of Race Today podcast, and my co-producer on the screen.
Hi, I'm Lisa Tuvalu. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Lisa. So today we will be talking about education, access, and equity. And a neat portion of our podcast is that we have incorporated having a local African-American business highlight their organization and provide you with incredible resources. So today we have the honor and pleasure of representing Jonathan Faircloth, who's the owner and executive director of Bright Beginnings Learning Academy, who will be giving us a little insight into what his organization offers the community. Jonathan?
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Faircloth, and I am the executive director and owner of Bright Beginnings Learning Academy. We are located in King George, Virginia. This academy is an early childhood academy, and we are committed to providing all of our students with a well-rounded early childhood education. So we take a little bit of structure and we take a little bit of play and we merge them together. Our main goal is to make sure that all of our kiddos are ready for kindergarten when the time comes. It's truly an honor to be able to open this early childhood establishment as a Black male in a very well female-dominated industry, which is awesome as well. But it's truly a pleasure. I've been in this industry for about 14 years. I tried to walk away and I got sucked right back in. I love working with children, but I love working with little children because they're little seeds, and all the knowledge that we give them, it's like water. You're just pouring that water on that seed and you're watching it bloom. And it's something that I enjoy doing every day. This school was built on a prayer and a dream. It started off with me saying, wow, I want to open up my own school. I want to open up my own early childhood establishment, but I don't know where to turn, what to do. And a good friend told me, pray on it. And that's what I did. I prayed on it and found a space. I was like, wow, okay, found a space. Well, we got to fund this space. We got to get supplies for this space. And my friend said, okay, so pray on it again and then ask your community. So I prayed on it and I asked my community and people donated like crazy to the school. And then I said, wow, okay, now we have to go through the licensing piece. I don't know if I'm gonna pass this, but we're going to give it a whirl. We're going to do this. Prayed on it again. Passed all my licensing. And we will be opening on May 10th. So if you would like any more information about our school, like I said, we have a wonderful program in store for the King George community and the surrounding communities. So if you'd like any more information about our program, please feel free to visit us at www.brightbeginningskg.com. And I would like to thank the Race Today committee for having me on. I appreciate it.
You are very welcome, Jonathan, again. And just to repeat, what was that website again?
So it is www.brightbeginningskg.com.
All right, kg.com. Perfect. Thank you, Jonathan. And we will continue to send blessings your way and be a resource to you as you are an incredible resource to our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You guys have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you. You too. All right. Well, thank you so much again. That was Jonathan Faircloth, with the owner and executive director of Bright Beginnings Learning Academy. We are so excited for them and will continue to do our part to help lift them up in the community. So with that, I'd like to take the time to have our panel introduce themselves as, again, we embark on this conversation around education, equity, and access. And in my Hollywood squares, who's up next for me is Gary Morris. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gary Morris, and I'm the proud principal at South County High School. This is my third year there, and I'm very excited about all the things that we are doing to educate our children. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Principal Morris. And next we have Michelle Tugby.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Togby. I'm a sophomore at South County, Go Stallions, and I'm here to kind of provide a student perspective.
Thank you, Michelle. Glad to have you. Next, we have Janice Edwards-Dalton.
Hello, everyone. My name is Janice, and I serve as a principal in Fairfax County Public Schools, right across the way from South County High School.
Very good.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. Next, we have Tish Dyer.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tish Dyer. I'm a paraprofessional in a kindergarten classroom at Lemon Road Elementary School, going into my 11th year, and I truly enjoy the littles. So glad to be here.
Thank you, Tish. Next, we have Felicia Wright.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Felicia Wright, and I'm the Director of Specialized Instruction at an alternative high school in Washington, D.C.
Welcome, Felicia. And I see we have one of our other co-producers, Carol Copeland. Would you like to say hello?
Hi, everyone. I apologize. I'm trying to get my picture. I thought I'm sorry I'm late. I'm actually working. This is horrible, but I'm trying to get my background picture. But my name is Carol Copeland. I'm a retired educator, former Prince George's County School public teacher and administrator, now producer. And I'm so excited for this episode and that you all are here. And I'm going, is it too late for me to change it now? It's being recorded, the picture?
You can if you'd like to, that's fine.
Okay. Yes,
thank you, Carol.
Welcome you all, and I thank you. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Carol. She is one of our dynamic trio of producers. So thank you for being here. And with that, I will now hand it off to our moderator extraordinaire, Mr. C.R. Gibbs. C.R., take it away.
Hello, everyone. Before I begin to ask you the questions, I need to give a birthday shout out celebrating their 77th birthday. Today is the United Negro College Fund. Founded in 1944 by two dedicated educators, much like all of you, Mary McLeod Bethune and Frederick Douglass Patterson. One quick note about Frederick Douglass Patterson. He is one of Anacastia's most famous children, and born back there in 1901 in what was called the Buena Vista section of Anacostia. But we all say Anacostia today. And I just wanted to acknowledge the great work and continuing work that they've done. It is just another dimension of that we can add to the accomplishments of dedicated educators such as yourselves. And with that, let me begin by putting out a general question, and that is, how has the COVID-19 affected your students? And anyone can reply. How has COVID-19 affected your students?
I think with my case, I'm a kindergarten assistant. So our kids didn't know any different coming in. As with COVID, they, some came from preschools, but I think generally most came from home. So them being on the computer as their first year into elementary school, they didn't know any different. So it was like, okay, this is what we do. Now the thing is, we have to think about come next year, we transition back and they're going to first grade. But yeah, our kids, just like us, they hopped on and we've been trying to figure it out together with 5 and 6 year olds. So they think it's cool.
Thank you. Anyone else? I know you've all been affected to a greater or lesser extent by the conditions of COVID-19. Come on, someone. I know you have something useful and inspiring to add. Again, how has COVID affected your students?
So as I said, I work in an alternative high school in DC. And so my student population are students who are 16 to 21 years old. And potentially a large fraction of our students have been to traditional high schools in DC and Maryland and have not been successful. And so some of the ways that I've seen that COVID has impacted them is lots of frustration. When you're talking about older learners who don't necessarily have some of the core executive function skills and organizational skills, and you're asking them to sort of transition from a traditional educational setting to a computer and kind of happen in a matter of weeks. There's been lots of frustration. There's been a toll sort of on their emotional capacity to kind of navigate through this COVID situation. And then a lot of them are experiencing there were some severe financial hardships before, but COVID has illuminated some of those more severe hardships with maybe people not working or people losing their job.
Anyone else?
I would add that one of my observations is the resilience. Actually, the impact, I know we could explore several variables about the negative component. Some of the positives that I've seen within my community is the resilience of children, the gratitude of teachers to be able to reflect and say, wow, when I was complaining before, now I see that it actually was a lot easier to navigate in a face-to-face setting than perhaps I had realized before. So in welcoming most of my students back to our campus, it's been a pleasure. You could tell that they've missed each other. So the social emotional component, I think the jury is still out on the long-term effects that we might see moving forward with that. However, we're in a very good place right now to move forward. And I know personally, I'm extremely appreciative to resemble something of normalcy and balance in education and social interactions within my community and with my staff.
It sounds like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just to piggyback and speaking from the high school perspective, I want to add on to what Janice said about the resilience piece. Our students have gotten stronger, but I think also speaking from the staff side, our staff has gotten stronger. It has forced us to have to collaborate a lot more. Teachers are having to know exactly what someone else is doing without being able to walk down the hall or next door from classroom to classroom and have a conversation with them. So allowing for a lot more planning and collaboration has been something that we've been forced to create within the school system, especially within our individual schools. And I think that our teachers have taken that on and done so well. And then on top of it, I do know that there have been some things that we've learned through this COVID process that we will take into next year when we go back to a more normal situation that will truly benefit our students as we move forward.
Thank you. It sounds like all of you have had to reach fairly deep into your toolkits to come up with strategies and techniques. I'd like for someone to sort of illustrate what kinds of changes have you made to help your students learn?
Well, I'll jump right in with the technology competency. So I've had to move quickly down the continuum of how to navigate those additional tools and resources and software and what really is most impactful for student learning, as well as easier navigation for teachers to learn again in such a truncated time period that we had to crank this up and move forward. So navigating the technology piece has definitely been a growth area for me.
I kind of want to follow up.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
No,
Sure.
I want to follow up Ms. Janice and say, from the special education lens, sort of technology has always been a major component of how we provide like accommodations and modifications to students, especially those who use assistive technology. And so it's kind of been that this has been my team, SPED team, a chance to show other educators and other teachers some of the work that we've been doing all along and how some of those things that we've already put in place can help all students, right? So a lot of my SPED teachers, I was saying, those computer programs that you're using with those kids or some students who may have some motor issues, like show those because those are some resources that can help all students. And so I would have piggybacked off the technology piece.
Indeed. Well, in terms of control, I even want to ask Principal Morris about this. How much control do you have related to the operations of your schools and your programs and your department? And do you believe, particularly in this time, you need more control? Anyone?
I wouldn't say I need more control. I think, we are given a lot of flexibility in terms of things that we do in our buildings. And I think we do the best to take advantage of those. What I've been, I guess, happy to find out during this time is that, that the leadership is going to allow us to make decisions that will benefit our students. We know our students the best. We communicate with our individual communities on a regular basis to find out what works. We give our students their voice to allow them to share with us what things will make our schools better. And we're allowed to put those things into place. When we find that students aren't doing well, in an environment like this, we were able to work with the county to develop systems to bring students in on our teacher planning day and allow students to come in on a Monday once a week to work individually with teachers for those students. But for some students who are having some difficulties that may need some individualized attention. And so we were able to capitalize on that and bring students in. So I think that when we're faced with these types of issues, we are given the latitude to make decisions. If you want to give me more of anything, then give me more time and give me more money, right? So because we can, with those two things, we can make just about anything happen. So and those things are don't come easily, of course. So we are well understanding that we have to work with what we have, but we're going to do the best job that we can to make sure our students get what they need.
Thank you. How about anyone else? Well, we just talked about time and money. And so my next question comes to the issue of the budget. And so I want to ask you, to what extent have you been able, what is your role, and this is open to everyone, related to the creation and recommendations of your school's overall budget, your input, execution, and in any other ways in which you have been able to make a difference?
I will lead in and say that we have what we need. Could we use more? I think that's always encouraged. And speaking of race today, I think the ability to really leverage your resources well and to be a good steward over the resources that you have, bringing that to the table as a principal of color has really helped me to, again, honor what my students need with the resources that we have, to tap into a network to fill in the gap if there are some gaps in terms of additional resources that we need. I appreciate the autonomy of here's the budget. So Janice, manage it well and figure out how to meet the needs of your students and your community. So I'm very appreciative of what Fairfax County has been able to offer and render in terms of fiscal responsibility and their budget.
All right. Well, yes, please go ahead.
I was just going to lean in and respond. It's interesting because the past week has been sort of filled in my role in DCPS with our budget. At City Council has been improving some things. And so I serve on a leadership team where I'm sort of the third, I guess you would say the third in charge. And so my role is to ensure that all decisions that are made about budget and funding, that there's equity in terms of realizing the specialized instruction population. And I will say as a leader, one of the things that I have learned during this time is because of some things related to COVID, our budgets for this school year had to shift and we had to be more creative. And I've been very proud of my team at the way that we have had to move some things. We've taken some things that we've learned from COVID and said, you know what, we're going to use this money and we're going to move it here. And so I just kind of looked at my team this week and I was like, we are really using our brain to think of some things, to be very creative, even though, we don't have all the funding that we would like. We are really moving and shaking and trying to make sure that for this next school year, as we're dealing with coming back, that our students are really getting what they need. And I was actually this week, really proud.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, we talked about leadership. We've talked about budget. I'd like to know from you, all of you, the impact and involvement of the community. How has community input, how have you been able to handle it, process it, and in your budget decisions? Community input. Have you had as much as you had pre-COVID? And do you expect more post-COVID?
Well, at the high school, it's traditional that our PTSOs are, represent a very, very small portion of our community, our parent community. And to some degree, it's somewhat unfortunate, but we do understand that, people tend to be busy. PTSOs meet, at 7:30 in the evening, and folks are having to come home and take care of their responsibilities at home with their kids and trying to get themselves ready for the next day, as everyone else is. I can't argue, that my PTSO is not, doesn't have the strongest showing that I would like. I mean, who wouldn't want to have, 100% of their parents involved in the decision-making process or some of the decision-making processes we go through. But at the same time, that could be a curse, right? You get too many chefs in the kitchen, it becomes a problem. But I will say that one of the things that I do tout as being a strength of South County is the overall support that I receive from our community. I don't go wanting much of anything when it comes to a request from the community. If I reach out and say, this is what I need, there will be a number of parents that will step up and will come forward with that need. I think that no different than with the county, you become a squeaky wheel, you will get oiled. And I have been blessed to have been oiled by my parent community. When things don't go as according to plan, what I've been fortunate enough to do and try to prepare my community with is being as transparent as possible about things that I may need or things that may or may not be able to happen. They have been quite the understanding community. And for that, I feel so fortunate and blessed to be at South County. We have Teacher Appreciation Week coming up, and I do know that we have a number of parents that will show up at the door with gifts and treats for our teachers to show their appreciation for the work that they've done. So I really can't argue or complain about anything when it comes to my community and what I've needed.
And I'm nodding because that's so very true. Gary and my students end up at his high school. I'm a feeder to his school. So I don't have, or I have never had to petition and not received from my community. So I'm so deeply appreciative of that. My trepidation is those relationships that build about the trust have been compromised because of COVID. Folks haven't been able to come in the building. You're not able to be as visual and make those connections and relationships as you've traditionally done in the past. So I'm excited to kind of get back into a platform where I can reach out and touch actually my community, because I know that's part of that goes into play of why they are so generous and so supportive, because of the positive relationships we've been able to build. So I concur, absolutely. And it gives me some pause that every community is not as supportive or in a position to be as supportive. We are very cognitively aware of that. And that's why these forums are so critically important, that we can have, equity in education. If I need extra computers, I can do an ask, and then the computers come, where we are well aware that again is not the situation at all schools and all communities throughout our nation. So I'm strongly advocating that we can have parity in terms of the resources and support throughout our nation. That's so critically important.
Thanks a lot.
And I was nodding along with Mr. Gary and Ms. Janice, because I am at an alternative setting where a lot of my students are of adult age. In DC identifies them as 18, they're an adult. And so parental and guardian involvement looks very different, right? And so we talk about community. Our community is mentors, our community are nonprofits, our community is, CFSA and Department of Rehabilitation Services. And so in thinking sort of about how the community has rallied around in terms of when, school was shut down, we had organizations who were emailing saying, hey, I know your students are going to need computers. Like, how many can I order? When can I drop it off? And so it was really a test to when we were in person, those relationships that we built, that even though we were through the computer, there were still people who were thinking about us, who were saying, my company has this grant, I want to give it to your school. And so my population was really, really grateful for that, because we don't have a traditional, like, solid PTA community, but we have other stakeholders and partners who are partnering us to make sure that our kids get what they need.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I would say from a staff point of view, we have a very supportive PTA where they've checked on the staff and have sent us reassurance that they miss us, that they care how we're doing our mental health. Some of us at my school are year round. For the full year, we're virtual. Like, I am virtual for the entire year. And I'm not even in the state right now. I'm in Connecticut taking care of my mom. But I've had my room parent PTA reach out to see if I need anything, to let me know that whatever they can do to help me while I'm here, just let them know. But we've always had a strong community at my school, and it has just showed even more during this pandemic, and just letting us know that they're there and they still have us.
Absolutely. What would you like to see, if you would like to see, the teaching style, the activities, equipment? How can we return that to a pre-COVID environment, or should we move teaching into something entirely different, having had the COVID experience? What would you like to see? And that's again open for anyone who would care to reply. Again, do we want to just simply get back to pre-COVID? Do we want to move in an entirely different direction? Based on what I've heard so far, some of you have discovered amazing strengths within your organization. And is there a way to harness that to take the post-COVID environment to another level?
I'm optimistic about that happening.
Oh, go ahead, Jen.
I'm optimistic about that happening. I can say with confidence that there's room for these new resources and technology moving forward. And I can also reflect and say the relationship piece of students being in a school building and building those relationships face-to-face with teachers is critically important. Establishing trust, it's very difficult to do virtually. I will say that. So in my heart, there is always going to be at the core and center of what we do, an environment where kids are face-to-face with their peers, as well as their community of learners, being the staff. So I will always advocate for that. I'm also well aware that there are some students that succeeded in the virtual environment that really went past expectations, that the virtual platform was really a good fit for them. So as educators, we can figure out and discern, a little more here or a little less there when students do come back to campus, kind of morphing into this new platform of instruction.
Thank you. Michelle, we haven't forgotten you. Would you like to comment on any of the answers that you've heard so far?
I loved listening to everybody talk about, their experiences with their schools and what they do. And one thing that I kind of wanted to comment on the latest question is I think that post-pandemic schooling should most certainly prioritize mental health. And I think that without a doubt, the pandemic has affected a lot of students' mental health or well-being. And it's not a question that, going back in the classroom, it's gonna look a bit different than what it was pre-COVID. And it's going to be an adjustment. And I think that students with mental health struggles didn't necessarily have adequate support in school pre-pandemic. And I definitely know that during the pandemic, my school for sure, we had our counselors reaching out, and they kind of showed us these are ways you can show up for your friends, even if you cannot physically be there. So I think that in a way we should kind of steamroll and keep that energy up in regards to like mental health and wellness.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, since I've got you, what about access and equity in a post-COVID environment, or if you care to comment even now? What changes, if you had a magic wand, what changes would you like to make, and what can you see for the future in terms of access and equity?
I can certainly see a lot more student input than before. Even now, there are new committees in FCPS that allow students to say, "Hey, I've kind of experienced this inequity in my community, in my school system, and I don't want this happening anywhere else." So that input, that communication between our admins, our committee leads, has kind of changed a lot. So I know for certain that my experiences or lack of access to certain things have most definitely changed, because I've been put in a few positions where I've been allowed to kind of express my experiences and how we can prevent similar experiences. But one thing that I know for certain COVID education has kind of changed is the whole mentality of, one size fits all. And I think that we learned that the differentiation and student engagement is vital to student learning and the outcomes of an online space. And traditionally, teachers, they create lessons and they would modify it for students in classrooms for various lessons, and content to mastery levels would change for whoever it is, an honors class, a regulars class, it depends. And I want to say that in the in-person classroom, this would kind of look like students moving forward and asking for help and asking, okay, I've reached this mastery level. Can I get kind of like a preview of what's going to be next? And I think that with online learning, it's kind of allowed students to spend a lot more time to incorporate their own interest into a deeper level of learning, because we've kind of had these opportunities to incorporate our own ideas, our own interest into our content.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michelle. I'll be back at you shortly. For the other panel members, how would you characterize your relationships with the school board, and how do you see things changing, if at all, once we get past the COVID environment?
Well, first and foremost, my school board members have been very supportive. They've both been by the school to check on things, to see how things are going, to find out if there are things that I need, to talk about next year and those things that we may want to do that may allow us to open the school year with a different perspective, and not coming from a woe is me, this is where we were perspective. We have to now climb out of this hole perspective, but a perspective of we are to some degree rebranding ourselves perspective, allowing us to simply say to ourselves that South County High School will continue to be a beacon, but we're going to use these new experiences that we've had over the last year and a half as a jumping off platform for where we want to go. And I think that again, I've no different than my parent community. If I have an ask, I tend to get an answer when I reach that high. Now, rarely do I reach that high. I'll be honest, I don't. I like to look at the concerns and the issues that I may have in my building, and use the resources within my building to solve those issues, because I really want the folks who have their hands in on our children to be the ones who are working with our children and coming up with those solutions, because they know them the best. There is a certain amount of of theory that comes from a position, or that comes with a position that is outside of a school building. And sometimes that theory does not jive with the reality of what goes on from day to day. And so I like to use them when I need the influence. I listen to them about the things that they're hearing, because of sometimes some things don't come across my desk. But for the most part, I keep our issues within our building so that we can solve those problems, as needed, and then use the resources around me if necessary. And again, when I reach out, I do get a call back, and I do, and it's very responsive. So I've been there, again, fortunate in my success at South County, simply because of the resources and the support I've received from both within and outside of our building.
Great. Anyone like to follow up? Okay. Is there a place post-COVID for fully remote education? Is that something you want to see in your own shops as classes once we get past this?
Michelle touched on it, that education is not a one-size-fits-all shoe, and that we have a number of students who, as Janet stated earlier, that have done very, very well, have found that the online way of doing things is their niche. And I think that if we can provide for that, then we do. But the difficulty with that is that requires some resources. It requires that we take a lot of time to dedicate a lot of energy to creating that environment for some students. And not that we can't do it, because we've contemplated it, we've thought about it, we've gone on the path of trying to build it. But it does take a lot of work, and to assume that we will be able to put that together in, we're sitting in April and we start in August, and to have a fully vetted process and program in place for that group, it's really difficult. I would imagine, so I think of it this way. So I was a member of South County when we opened our building. The administrative team that came to South County that year, the year we opened, was in place the June prior. So it takes a lot of time to make sure that you have all the things, all your ducks in a row, to make a program not only doable, but also valid and worth doing, and continuing. And then on top of it, you have to build in the fact that that you're going to have some failures along the way. Failures is those things that we try to teach our kids that are okay. That if you don't take into account those things, then what tends to happen is that we put something together, it does not work right, and then you toss it. So we have to have that in place. So I think that in order to, while it's very, I think it's something that could be very important and very valuable for a certain group of students who could thrive in that environment. I do think that for us to rush to get it done might be a mistake. But we do want to try to find that type of environment, if it can exist, to work for those kids as best we can. But understand that it's not going to be perfect when we roll it out, and that along the way we can make it better if we continue to work at it.
I imagine that's particularly true with underprivileged students. May I inquire as to the extent to which all of you are affected, or are you all looking at initially a hybrid solution coming back, but by this time next year, will everyone be back in the classroom, and what challenges do you see for that? And because let's face it, that these are nettlesome situations, and every situation is unique. But I asked, are we looking at the greater or lesser use of hybrid education situations? And does your experience suggest that one or the other will be better for your underprivileged students?
Mr. Gibbs, there's a couple things that have been said that I wanted to piggyback on. I've been trying to take notes, so I'm gonna try to roll this conversation into
Okay.
one. But the idea about this, so I want to say what Michelle said about mental health. This idea about mental health is something that special educators have been dealing with for a long time, right? When we talk about some of the things, and all students, but particularly when we talk about certain disability classifications that are related to mental health and how that impacts your performance and experience in education. And so one of the things that I think that COVID sort of has been on our side is it has showed us that, hybrid or in person, it does take a lot of work, because my students, in terms of some of my certain levels of special education students, I started bringing them back into the building in October on a hybrid model, right? And so we identified a cohort of students who had the greatest need, and there were certain days they were coming in. And so as an administrator, I was having to manage a hybrid schedule, a virtual schedule and an in-person schedule. But I think one of the things that it has shown is that some of those things that we were asking for before that were like, no, Ms. Wright, I don't think we're going to do that. I don't think we're going to try that. Now it has shown that we can try that, and that for some students, it is going to work. And trust me, it is a lot of work. As I talk to other, leaders in Maryland and Virginia, and we talk about some unique concerns to my population in terms of when we talk about socioeconomic status, and some of the students, I primarily support students in DC Ward 6, 7, and 8. And some of the data about where those students stand, there are some different concerns in terms of, giving you a computer is one part, right? I can say, okay, having access to the technology, but then we have to talk about management of the technology. Then we have to talk about usability of the technology. And so I think that one of the things for my population is that some of those lessons that you talked about that we've learned, we're now moving forward and saying, yes, this is going to be a lot of work, right? But we have data to now show that A, we can do it, and B, that some students are going to learn. And so some of those situations before that were a little tricky, where we were trying to manage, for example, like students who are hospitalized, now we can say, okay, this hybrid sort of model of in-person and a virtual, those students can now access education just like their peers, right? And that's making a difference for them, because when we talk about equity, that's opening up a whole other lane for them. That's understanding that their playing field is not the same, but there are some things that we can do to still make sure that they're included and that they're able to enjoy the benefits of receiving an education.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That does clarify several issues. Do any of you anticipate dealing with students who simply disappear after being through so much? And if you do, what are your plans to bring them back? And if you don't, then please tell us why.
I will share two components with that. One, that because we were in a pandemic and there were so many unknown variables, I wanted to extend as much grace as possible. If a family is struggling with employment or where they're going to live, or a spouse is hospitalized or a grandparent is hospitalized, it may not be their top priority to log on every day because they're trying to navigate so many other critical life decisions and situations. And the balance of that is we didn't want to lose anybody. Like, what were you able to honor in an instructional week or an instructional day? And how can we best support you? So with my teaching staff, it was important to have those conversations and be in consistent communication with the families to know, just how much to push, right? And then just how much grace needs to be extended in a very critical time. So we were very aware of that and figuring out how to be the best support, and recognizing that we want all students to learn and to learn at high levels and have access and opportunity. And I want their social emotional health to stay intact, right? So what components of that do we need to be a little more forgiving with? So that was really the lens in which we approached that particular situation.
All right.
I'd like to chime in and simply say that, it's our intention to recapture every student that we could possibly get back. I'm a firm believer that no student ever walks through the threshold of any school wishing to fail. It's not what they intend to do. Their goal is to be the best student that they could possibly be. And that, does that mean that they're a student? Maybe not, but it does mean that they want to be successful to some degree. And so my promise to my students, and I'm sure it is the promise of every educator that's on this call, that we will do whatever it is that we can do to allow those students to fulfill that goal. And sometimes, when in this situation, what the pandemic really has done to students who were reluctant in the first place is allowed them to be a bit more reluctant. It is taken some of their focus away because they haven't had, someone tapping on their shoulder when they might, get into a little daze, so to speak, during a class period to get them refocused. And so we want to bring those students back and be that tap on the shoulder, because we need these young men and women to be successful. I am approaching retirement age. I need those folks working and working well. So we need to make sure that we encapsulate and include and recapture every one of those young men and women, regardless of gender, of ethnicity. We need all of our young people, back focused. And then, the one of the real things about this is that, none of us got into this job to work through a computer. We really do thrive on that person to person contact. And we understand that our children need that, that some of our kids who may misbehave, they're not misbehaving because they don't know how to behave. They misbehave because they need someone to intervene, and they want that. And it is a cry for attention in many cases. And so we want to provide that for them as well. And it's just the job that we want to do. So why not give it to them? Because we know they want it as well. As much as they may fight, and they do fight from time to time, they really want to have someone to say, you did a great job, congratulations, you've been successful, and here is that diploma.
Thank you. Thank you. Where are we with and I assume this is hanging over all of you, the requirement for COVID vaccinations, and how do we get that balance between the desire to recapture students and at the same time make sure that we satisfy any state or local requirements to make sure that the young people come back fully vaccinated?
Personally, I don't know how we'll get around that piece. I don't know that we could ever require every kid to have that vaccine. Although, as I go through year to year and we're enrolling students into the building, we do require them to have some vaccines. That every kid must be Tdap, and so you have these things that are requirements, but there are certain situations where a student may not be able to take the vaccine simply because of a health condition. And so what would you do with that child? And so I think that there's some one-offs that we have to consider before we make that decision to require that every student be vaccinated. And there could be religious reasons behind it that we have not researched or thoroughly vetted. And I think those things, again, need to be considered before we make a decision like that. And as soon as you make that decision or you make that accommodation for one group, then you have to consider every other group who may have another concern or question. So, as much as I would like to be able to take my mask off on a daily basis and walk freely, I'm willing to wear it to ensure that, that everyone is safe within our building.
Okay. I heard some folks who might want to participate or follow up. Please come forward.
No, I was just going to say something very similar to Mr. Gibbs. In the school district that I work in, I know that there has been a huge focus on making sure that vaccines are available. And so I know that that's the point that we're at now before we start, mandating some things, making sure that everyone has a chance to get it. But I think from a personal standpoint, because I don't want to speak for my district, is that I too wonder about some of those religious reasons, some of those medical reasons. And so I think that we have really been trying to do a good job of making sure that we're following the health protocols. Because I am back in the building at least 4 days a week, we have a protocol of where staff and students can be tested in the building. We've also been receiving at-home health test kits. And so I think for now, the best thing that we can do is to make sure, I also do not like wearing my mask either. I really wish that I could just be free all the time and, hug my students. But just making sure, I think the focus now is making sure that all of the guidance that has been put out from the health department, that we're following that and that we're being respectful of, even though we open the building, some parents are like, Miss Wright, I'm not ready for my child to come back, right? Like, we've had so many family members to COVID. We have some anxiety about that, and kind of showing some grace and realizing that everyone is sort of experiencing their own thoughts about this, and, not making anyone feel uncomfortable because they are deciding not to get the vaccine, or that they're deciding not to come to school. And so it's just sort of, as a leader, all of those things that you kind of have to take into consideration as you're talking and planning and communicating with your students and their families.
Thank you. Michelle, do you have any comments on the issues that you've heard so far?
In regards to the vaccine, I know so many people who have just been, or at least over the age of 16, who are like so pumped to get it. And, I've yet to kind of like, stumble upon those few who are like saying for religious reasons or, other reasons that I personally don't know of. So I don't see it as a requirement in the future. I don't think it's a possibility for it to be a requirement, maybe a couple years down the road, but I don't see it as a requirement like in 4 months when the new school season starts.
What do you find would be the most beneficial aspects about remote learning that you've personally experienced, or that perhaps your friends have personally experienced? And would you like to see it further incorporated into the rest of your education?
On a personal front, I want to say a benefit of remote learning. Somebody used this analogy with me the other day. And before COVID, you kind of have a plate of what you have to do in a day. 70% of it is what you have to do, and the rest is what you want to do, what you feel as if you can or want to in a way. And I feel like when COVID hit and we were moved to an online setting, I had the school day and then I had a bunch of time to do what I wanted. I didn't have to force my dad to drive me to practice or to another club meeting. No, I could do things back to back. I could go to a Zoom meeting. I could go to a Google Meets meeting. I could spend some time with my sister. So I think for me on a front, it's kind of been a huge learning curve about time management and using my time wisely and doing things that I really care about rather than only focusing on things that I have to do or what I should do to get a diploma or I don't know. And then on a front where returning to school, I want to say activism. It's something that my generation has particularly really shown a lot of care for. We had, I want to say in June, a fellow student of mine, organized a protest near our school building. And in a sense, I don't want to say that I was assured that we wouldn't get in trouble or something. I want to say that knowing our school community wouldn't send out like a mass email of like, hey, what you did last weekend, you can't gather near school grounds like that. We kind of had like an assurance that that wouldn't happen, if that makes any sense. And I hope going forward, we kind of incorporate activism, not necessarily in school teaching, but let's say, clubs and, resources, putting resources out there in emails, or just, you learned about something during class and you want to further know if it's still a problem in today's society, if people are marching against something like that, knowing that a teacher, a fellow student, or just a peer in general could give you more resource on that and kind of influence how far you go on an activism front, I think is something post-COVID is definitely going to be around.
Well, what kind of support would you like to see for issues like equity and access from your community? And do you think it is adequate at the current time?
I want to say that it's been adequate. Fairfax County, one thing that I noticed for sure is that they're very good at holding themselves accountable, and just schools in general. I think when the school community and just your area in general holds your school or FCPS accountable, you kind of ensure that certain aspects of equity are still attainable. And so simply like recognizing access in unfair circumstances isn't enough anymore, if that makes any sense. I think actually calling out the unfairness in the system or where it needs to change is kind of something that most adults and people in the community have kind of realized that is their responsibility to also do. And I think also maintaining that kind of community support, especially, really shows that, students get support outside of the classroom when members of the community of your area are showing up and saying, no to injustices and calling out inequities.
Thank you much. Well, we're nearing the end of our program. I want to not leave activism. I'd like to give each of you that wishes an opportunity to comment on greater activism, community support in your local schools, and where you see it now and where you see it post-COVID. And yes, I'm taking volunteers for that answer. So would anyone care to comment?
I'll step in and say that I've been working really hard throughout the time I've been at South County to provide our students with voice and opportunities to be able to share what their concerns might be on any level. But when it comes to activism, we definitely want to increase that student voice. We have begun a totally student run online newspaper where our students may write to basically, because it's online, to the world about their concerns. And so we are working on getting that to be a mainstay, not only for our students in their individual time, when they decide that they want to do something related to that, but also integrating our classes and integrating the newspaper into our classes to allow a much larger staff of writers to be a part of that paper. Michelle has reached out to me to co-sponsor a club with her that will be activist related, and I am very excited about what that's going to look like next year. We are in the early stages of getting paperwork squared away, and so I'm excited about that. But anytime that students have the opportunity to share, I think it shapes what we do. And so, we just invite our students to continue to come to us. All of us have these, quote unquote, open door policies. The open door policy really does exist, at least in my building. I can say for sure that if students come and want to do something, I try my best to be the principle of yes and be able to say yes to the things that they would like to do. And if we can get it going, I think that the momentum that really does exist in that building is unstoppable.
Thank you. And I put this question out to Felicia and Tish and Janice. What does activism and what is the face of activism with respect to access and equity look like to each of you now and in a post-COVID environment?
I'll jump in and add that The first and foremost thing that I hope to do is to influence. I think leadership really is about the power to influence. And the best influential piece I can be is to model what it is that I expect to others, right? I really want to do that consistently and to build within my staff the capacity to say, not only are we culturally proficient, we're culturally responsive, right? That we see a need and we meet the need. Independent of gender, race, creed, socioeconomic status, we look to see the need, and you have to build a lens for that. You have to build a lens for that. And so I'm really working in my advocacy within my school building that our staff really know and understand and value each other, and they value their students. And then within our students that we're going to build critical thinking and problem solving skills. So whatever they grow up to value and put their energy behind, they're able to articulate that. They're able to utilize resources about that. They become the instrument of change. And so that is my role. That's where I focus my energy and my time. And it really does take up a lot of energy and time to do that work well. I've been at my school for the last 6 years, and I can say with a level of confidence that we have a staff that is responsive in that regard, and that we are building a community outside of our school that is as responsive as well. So I'm extremely proud of the work that we're doing. I recognize that there is more work to be done. We're excited about that. This forum, Race Today, gives us an opportunity, again, to let others know of the work that we're doing or the work that we're hope to continue doing with that support. So thank you so very much for allowing us to come together and talk about race and education and equity and fairness. And I'm appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Last chance to make your opinions known before I turn this over to Lisa and Alicia. Anyone else? Any other comments?
Yes, Mr. Gibbs. So one of the last things that I just wanted to say, and I'll be very quick. When I think about activism and I think about bringing around about policy or societal change, I think about when we're talking about equity and race in education, that education is just one part of this. And that is the lane that, is my life's work, but being a good partner to realize that when students come to me, there are some other factors that contribute to how they were showing up and how they are receiving things, and making sure that I am always, I think one of the things that I enjoy about DC is that it is a very community that's focused with different partners or different agencies, but that I'm always advocating for my students and saying that this is what they need in order to come to school and be successful. And how can my lens or how can my expertise or how can my voice impact some of those other things so that I can make sure that when they come to school at 9:30 a.m. and when they leave at 3:30, that I've given them everything that they need, and so that they, have safe environments to come to the next day. And I know that because education is, when we talk about equity, in my opinion, a piece of it, right? There are some other factors of things that happen outside of school that we cannot control, but we can all work together to make sure that we are trying to make sure that in every space that we have control over, that we're pushing an agenda and that we're working together. And so that is sort of my commitment as families tell me about their housing situations, their economic situations, their requests for mental health, that when I'm sitting at the table with some of these people, I'm advocating for them and I'm saying, this is what they need to be successful in school. So how can we work together to make sure that they get it? If that means I'm going to host an event and I want you to come and have a table to pass out your literature, or at our PTO meeting, I'm going to give you, a 10-minute segment to talk about some of those things, but that we're just being good partners to each other. And I think that's something that's going to be moving forward in COVID. That's very, very important as you talk about community, whether it's the PTA, whether it's a nonprofit, but just being really strong and good partners to each other so that we can get through this.
Thank you so much.
And
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I piggyback on what everyone has said. I know with our administration, with the climate that we're in now, has just opened up dialogue, honest dialogue to staff to have us come and just express our feelings and for us to help them understand, even though they may not understand some of our struggles. They want to know how can they help and how can they be a support and how can they be advocates with us and for us, and how on the elementary level, how can we have a openness in the area for the young ones to express themselves, and how can we help them? Because a lot of this is scary to them, you know, and we have to let them know that it's okay to be where we are, and that, you know, we're here to support them. And so that's what, you know, in the elementary world, it's a lot different from the olders because we have these young ones. And so we're just learning. Like I said, my administrator has been great, where she's called us in and was like, what can we do to support you all and to let you know that we're here, and how can we help teach our community, you know, about things that are going on, and how can we do it the right way and not mistakenly do it the wrong way, you know? So I just think that communication, that support is what is needed and what's, you know, we're getting.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all of our panelists today for their erudition and sophistication in their responses. And I turn you back over to our hosts, and Dr. Williams, take it away.
Thank you, CR, and thank you to each of you. Again, education is my passion. I got my doctorate in education from GW, and so this conversation has been truly filling in so many different ways. And so I appreciate each of you for investing in this time and your energy and your resources and your expertise. Again, there's so much that we can do, so much to be grateful for and thankful for. And again, thank you for being here to represent your respective areas in education. Lisa, do you want to close us out?
First of all, I want to thank all of our panelists for voicing their opinions and sharing their experience. It's been very informative, particularly about how they've been resilient and worked as a community to pool their resources and also identify the value of mental health. And I believe going forward, it will just make, this experience will make all of us stronger. Thank you so much.
Thank you and have a great afternoon.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Goodbye, everyone.